ہر لفظ میں زہرا کے قرآن بولتا ہے، قرآن کی صورت ہے کلام زہرا، پاکیزہ ہے پھولوں سے۔ درود پڑھ دیں گے۔ ایک اور درود۔
اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم۔
سلام کے چند شعر توجہ چاہوں۔ اور کوئی مظہر داور نظر آتا نہیں، اور کوئی مظہر داور نظر آتا نہیں، بز میں کن میں دوسرا حیدر نظر آتا نہیں، اور کوئی مظہر داور نظر آتا نہیں، جس کو دل تسلیم کر لے ہم سرے بیت خدا، بیت عطرت کے سوا وہ گھر نظر آتا نہیں، اور کوئی مظہر داور نظر آتا نہیں، ہے ابو طالب علی عباس ایسے بے مثال، کوئی ان جیسا وفا پہ کر نظر آتا نہیں، کوئی ان جیسا وفا پہ کر نظر آتا نہیں، اور کوئی مظہر یاور نظر آتا نہیں، یوں تو پنجوں پر کھڑے کتنے میدان جری، یوں تو پنجوں پر کھڑے کتنے میدان جری، ان میں کوئی فاتح خیبر نظر آتا نہیں، اور کوئی مظہر داور نظر آتا نہیں، اور کوئی مظہر داور نظر آتا نہیں، جو محمد نے سجایا ہے بعنوان قدیر، جو محمد نے سجایا ہے بعنوان قدیر، دل کے اندھوں کو وہی منبر نظر آتا کہ اندھوں کو وہی
منبر نظر آتا نہیں،
پڑ گئی ہے جن کے دل پر بغض حیدر کی
نقاب،
ان کو احمد کا کبھی بستر نظر آتا نہیں، اور کوئی مظہر
داور نظر آتا نہیں،
مر نہ جائے ماں کہیں مالک یہ منظر
دیکھ کر،
سامنے جھولا ہے اور اصغر نظر آتا نہیں، چل بسی بینا یہ کوثر نبی
کے لال کی
ڈھونڈتے ہیں اور علی اکبر نظر آتا نہیں، اور کوئی مظہر فاتحہ۔
بسم اللہ الرحمن
دو تین بند مرسی کے پہنچا جرم میں شبر ذی جہاں کا سر، پہنچا جرم میں شبر ذی جہاں کا حجت تمام کر کے وغا کی بغیر عرض کو دی وہ زکے جھکے شامیوں
کے سر،
ماں بولی شکر خدا وند ماں سنی سن کے شکر خدا وندے کنبے میں بات رہ گئی وہ کام ہو
گیا،
بن باپ کے پسر کا بڑا نام ہو
گیا،
بن باپ کے پسر کا بڑا
نام ہو گیا،
آنسو خوشی کے آنکھوں سے سب کے ہوئے زینب پکاری فتح مبارک ہو بھائی جان، جتنا تم جیتا تمہارے لال نے
رن میں
مشہور تھا سپاہ گری میں وہ پہلوان، مارا بڑے عدوے شہ کربلا کو، بھیا حسن بھی دیکھتے کاش اس لڑائی کو، بھیا حسن بھی دیکھتے کاش اس لڑائی کو، پہنچے جو ناش ابن حسن پر دیکھا کہ سر کو کاٹنے والے ہیں بشمار، غصے سے کانپنے لگے عباس نام للکار کر بڑھے صفت شیر کردگار، للکار کر
بڑے
شہر
پردگار
بھاگے عدو جو ڈر کے تو نقشہ بدل
گیا
ہلچل میں اس یتیم کا لاشا بھی چل
گیا
ہلچل میں اس یتیم کا لاشا بدل
گیا
روتے ہوئے قریب جو آئے شہر
خدا
دیکھا تمام عزوے بریدہ جدا
جدا
ہاتھوں سے دل پکڑ کے کہا وائے
مدا
امت کا یہ سلوک تو دیکھو پے
خدا
امت کا یہ سلوک تو دیکھو پے
خدا
ابن حسن کی جان پہ صدمے گزر
گئے
لو نانا جان قاسم ناشاد مر لو نانا جان قاسم ناشاد مر پہنچا جرم میں شبرے ذیشاہ کا پسر تماسی دعا اعوذ باللہ من الشیطان الرجیم بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم السلام علیک یا ابا عبد اللہ وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين صلاة على محمد وآل محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. So yesterday we were talking about the final part of the system of misguidance. Like we've explained, just as there is a system of guidance, there is also a system of misguidance. Because when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He guides and He misguides, He doesn't guide or misguide randomly. There are systems in place for guidance and there are paths in place for guidance. And in the same way, there are systems in place for misguidance and paths towards misguidance. So we started by talking about the nature of the world, looking at the verses of the Holy Quran that explain to us in detail how the world can be a place in which the human being can become confused and distracted. And then we looked at the role of shaitan, and we saw how shaitan plays an important role in the path of misguidance or the system of misguidance. And then we also saw how companion demons also play an important role in that system. And bringing together the final part of that system is to talk about the human nafs. So we started by talking about how the nafs is the source of cravings and appetites. We looked at various verses in the Holy Quran that talk about aspects of the nafs, how the nafs is greedy and stingy, how it has envy, how it has gratuitous complaining, and how it is expressed as commanding towards evil. And we explained when we were talking about the companion demons as well, how when someone takes a trajectory, the deeper and deeper they dig that hole, the harder and harder it is for them to come out of it. But we explained as well that the fitra, or the natural disposition of the human being, where they tend towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is also very resilient. But if a person was to ignore the outcries of the fitrah, then they are setting themselves up to go down a very destructive trajectory. And all of this was to also explain how our faith helps us in the meta-modern world. So after the lecture yesterday, one of the youth stopped me outside and said to me that you said in your lecture that there are some things that don't change. So how do we balance things that don't change with the meta-modern world? What are the things that don't change? So I was talking about the nature of the dunya doesn't change. Since the time of the Prophet, when that revelation came down, talking about how human beings, get confused and distracted, or the verses that talk about the human nafs and how it commands towards evil, these things don't change. These things are things that are established patterns of human behavior and also the nature of the world. What does change though in the meta-modern world and in all of the different eras that we find ourselves in are the specificities or the specifics of how the world is distracting. So if you like, in previous generations, perhaps people used to compete on other things that we don't compete about now. And as we move further into the meta world, or if you like, into the world of AI and virtual reality and things like that, we will find many more different circumstances in which these apply. So for example, nowadays, people might keep up with the Joneses through Instagram. That is something that many of us growing up here will have not experienced in our own lives. But as we see new challenges coming forward, this is one way in which those established things change. Another way in which they change is how we frame them. So for example, although we have spoken about the nafs throughout if you like, the intellectual history of Islam, they've spoken about the nafs, perhaps in today's world, we will equate it more with psychological terminology. We'll talk about things like anxiety and depression, rather than perhaps some of the other subject areas that people would have talked about in the past. So the framing can also change. And with that framing, the complexity and the depth of that framing can also change. We are perhaps in a better position to understand and to elucidate different things about the nafs than we would have been many years ago. Islamic scholarship goes on a development journey as well. So we understand new things today, which perhaps we didn't understand as well in the previous eras. So these are all ways in which the meta-modern and those, if you like, established truths fit together. I also got another question, another very important question, about shaitan and the nafs. The question was, you explained how shaitan is so covert that we have not perhaps even realized that shaitan is whispering to us. So how do we distinguish between shaitan's voice and our own voice? Because many times, like I said, one of the best tactics of shaitan is to speak from within. So you think that it is you who's speaking, not him who's speaking. So how do we distinguish between the two? Mullah Sadra actually has a very good solution to this issue. And the solution centers around self-awareness. The more a person is aware of how their nafs sounds, the more they will be in tune with the foreign voice. The way he explains it is this. He says that the whispering of shaitan has a certain smell. Okay? Just like, for example, if you have milk and then the milk goes off and you smell that milk, it gives you a kind of certain smell that's different from normal milk. When someone hears the whispering of shaitan, it comes with certain feelings attached to it. A kind of intuitive understanding of, where did that come from? That's not regular in my thought process. That's not the way I think. Okay? So the more we are aware of what is normal, the normal situation in ourselves, the easier it is for us to identify a foreign influence. It is like, for example, if we look at a picture every single day. We wake up in the morning, let's say that picture is in front of our bed. We wake up and we look at that picture. It's very easy for us to notice when something has changed about that picture. Perhaps a child has gone and drawn on it with a coloring pencil, but you can tell when something has changed. In the same way, the more a person is aware of their nafs and aware of themselves, the more they are aware of any foreign influence. So this is the answer to that question as well. We trailed off yesterday. We had to finish at a point where I had started to explain some of the framings of the nafs. And both of the framings that I want to talk about are traditional framings. So the framing that we were talking about was one that talked about desire, anger, imagination, and intellect. Okay, so if I remind you, desire is our pulling of things that are of benefit to us. Okay, we desire things that we perceive to be of benefit. And of course, that's what we mean when we say we want something. That strong urge and desire for when you do want something. That is what desire means. It is an aspect of this psychological faculty that we call the nafs. Okay? That was the first aspect. The second aspect was deflecting and pushing away harm, which is summarized as anger. Okay? And the reason it is called anger is because this is the emotion that is usually evoked in order for us to push away harm. Okay? So when we feel something is encroaching, okay, and going to cause us some type of harm, the emotion we react with is anger. Because anger is needed to re-establish the boundaries. And here, anger is not negative. Anger is positive. Okay? You need to have a motivation within that enables you to keep your boundaries and enables you to state what you think. Okay? So this aspect of us is something that is obviously very positive, but it can push over into the red zone as well. I'll give you an example. If you see that your child is about to be hurt by another child, okay, that other child is going to hit your child or is going to in some way harm them. As a parent, okay, you will feel that harm will be deriving to your child. So what will you do? You will spring into action. Okay, you will try your level best to prevent that harm reaching someone who you love, which you perceive as a personal harm. It might as well be harm to yourself. Okay? Now, as you do that and as you spring into action, while that is positive, you may overstep the boundary. You may treat the other child roughly. More roughly than you would have liked another parent to treat your child if they were in a similar situation. Or you might berate that child and scream at them in a way that is perhaps over the top. So it is very easy, and we all know when the emotion of anger wells up, it's very difficult to have perspective. Okay, if you think of every road rage incident you have had, it is probably to do with something very small, but in that moment, You may put everything to one side. You may catch yourself swearing. You may catch yourself making all kinds of dangerous movements with your car. And it's only after you calm down that you realize that, okay, it wasn't the end of the world. But in that moment, it's very, very difficult to control anger. In the same way that when desire and wanting something is very, very strong, it is very difficult to regulate. Okay, when you want something very badly, it's very difficult to bring yourself back into rational parameters. And both of these two aspects, these are your basic forces within this aspect of you, which is called the nafs. Now, these basic forces are intensified with something called imagination. Okay? The imagination is again a faculty which we have from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which has many, many uses and many purposes. We are able to understand examples through our imagination. We are able to create art through our imagination. We are simply able to find our way home through imagination. Because when we walk in one direction and we want to return the same way, we have to store all of the images to walk to a place, then reverse them, and then walk back. Okay, so we walk back on the plan that we concoct using our imagination from the images that we pick up going in a certain direction. But of course, as we all know, imagination intensifies those two basic forces. If you want something, the more and more you think about it, the more and more you imagine the pleasure that you're going to get out of that specific thing, okay, the more and more you desire it. For example, it is natural to desire tasty food. But if you spend a good hour on your reels watching all the different types of food that are available in so many different shops, okay, all of a sudden your appetite increases, okay? Your want for that food increases, okay? And this is why we should never do that before iftar time, because it makes everything very, very difficult, okay? But it's very easy to see that. We've all experienced in life when we want something, the more we imagine it, the more we allow that to bubble in our minds, the more we desire it. And then also if we think about anger as well, if I go back to that car rage example, all of the different permutations of how you will exact your revenge on the person who cut you up, okay? You will think about every martial arts movie that you've seen to imagine all of the different ways in which you can take out this anger on this poor individual, okay, who might be deserving of anger, but not to this extent. Okay, you can get yourself in prison with some of the things that go through your mind, right, of the things that you would actually have wanted to carry out in the moment. So the imagination is like this. And of course, the imaginal is shaitan's playground. Because shaitan is an imaginal being. When I say he's an imaginal being, what that means is that because he has a subtle body, he doesn't have a material body, he has a subtle body, the imagination is the place where he likes to play. Okay? That is where, like I said to you, he is a force that whispers. That whispering helps you to go off into a spiral. Your basic forces are your nafs. Okay? They are good and bad. They are not something you're supposed to get rid of. They're something you're supposed to regulate. But it is then driven to another level with the imagination. Part of it is you, and part of it is the involvement of shaitan. And like I said, shaitan here on the level of personal whispering, and shaitan on the level of societal whispering. Okay? And that is how the dunya then becomes a source of potential misguidance. Okay, so this is the imagination. And finally, in this system of understanding the nafs, we have the intellect. Now the intellect is not part of the nafs, just like imagination strictly is not part of the nafs. It affects the nafs, but it's not part of the nafs. The intellect is a balancing force. With the intellect, you reason with yourself. You recontrol and rebalance all of that which has become out of balance with your nafs. Okay? So maybe it's hard to deal with the anger and the want in the moment, but there are times where those calm down a little bit. And at that time, the human being uses their intellect to bring them back into some sort of equilibrium. But the intellect, the work on the intellect, is something that has to be done preemptively as well. A human being can control their nafs not just after the fact. So they don't have to get angry and then reason with themselves not to get angry. Rather, what they have to do is they have to preemptively reason with their nafs and explain to them certain things. So for example, having perspective on life and having perspective on the minor stresses of life. That is something that doesn't have to happen in the moment. In fact, it's very hard to have a full intellectual kind of enlightenment moment in the middle of anger. You need to have those moments outside of that. And that is why one of the key strategies for dealing with the nafs is a three-pronged approach called, and it's these three stages: musharata, which means to put a condition on yourself; muraqaba, which means to watch over that condition; and muhasaba, which means to analyze and to account for your actions. So musharata is very easy. It is when you realize that something is wrong and you say, from today, I will not do that anymore. Okay, that is putting a condition on yourself. And the clearer and more specific your condition, the better you're setting yourself up for a meaningful change. Okay? Sometimes this stage, okay, can be the most important stage, and it can take time for you to get to that clarity. Okay? Sometimes we have to make a mistake, not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 5 times, not 10 times, hundreds of times. So for example, say you know you overeat generally. Okay? Something, you can't help it. Now, you overeat sometimes to the extent that you feel sick, and then you also feel bad that you've overeaten. Okay? So you might feel sick of it the first time, but it might not be enough for you to make a real change, make a real condition on yourself that you're not going to overeat. But once this has happened enough times, and once perhaps other factors come in, so maybe people make fun of you for being overweight, or maybe, for example, you start to have health problems because of being overweight, or other factors, maybe you yourself would like a change. When those factors build and add up, you make a sincere and strong intention. That is what musharata is. Musharata is where you make a decision. You take things into your own control and say, I am going to change this. Okay? But because the human being, even when they get to that stage, is quite fickle, the next thing that we have to do is be watchful over the path to new action. Okay? So we can't let ourselves make a strong decision and then fall off. We need to make that strong decision and then watch over the fact that we are continually, applying those conditions that we put on ourselves. And then the final stage is something called muhasaba. Muhasaba is to look over and to judge ourselves, to hold ourselves accountable. In a hadith, we have hasibu anfusakum qabla an tuhasabu. Account for yourselves, or make yourselves accountable to yourself, okay, before you are made accountable. Okay? So this is an encouragement in Islam to hold ourselves accountable. And like we said, the whole message of Nadir, a large part of it is the accountability of the human being. Okay, we have another hadith that says, لَيْسَ مِنَّا مَنْ لَمْ يُحَاسِبْ نَفْسَهُ فِي كُلِّ يَوْمٍ. Someone who does not take account for themselves every day is not one of the party of the Ahlul Bayt. Okay, they're not one that is included in the party of the Ahlul Bayt. Now why is this? This is because accountability is this important. You cannot expect to improve. You cannot expect to change if you give yourself a free pass. Giving yourself a free pass is something that is going to take you down a trajectory in which the nafs will take over, because you will allow those desires and the anger in that nafs to just take you wherever it wants to take you. So, to take account is very important, but how we take account is also important. In the books of akhlaq, they speak about treating your nafs as a child. Okay? And as you know, a child is not expected to get everything right first time. A child is expected to try, but perhaps not to get things right. And then, how we account or take the child to account is different to how we take an adult to account. We take a child to account in a much softer way. Okay? So because we're careful that when we take that child to account, we don't over blame it to the extent that it will demotivate them, or that will push them away from a praiseworthy goal. So how we take account of ourselves is very important, because it ties back into the natural way that the nafs is. The nafs itself will recognize its flaw and will complain about it. Okay? And so if we add to that complaint, then we risk pushing our own nafs into a space where it doesn't really want to engage with religion. And if we think about this again, when we look at our approach to religion, if our approach to religion is one where we emphasize over perfection, or we emphasize exact perfection, okay, it must be this way, otherwise Allah doesn't love me. If I don't wake up for Fajr one day, Allah doesn't love me. If I miss Salatul Layl one day, everything is going to go wrong in my life. Okay? If I am, missing any kind of ritual or missing any kind of thing that I believe is important, then everything has fallen apart. I must show myself to Allah as the perfect being, because Allah doesn't accept anyone who is not perfect. Okay? I can't face Allah because I've sinned today. Okay? All of these ideas push us into a space where religion becomes very difficult. It's very, very difficult, because we are fallible beings expecting perfection from ourselves before we've taken the steps to get there. Okay? Or even if we've taken steps to get there, we're human beings at the end of the day. If a person doesn't wake up for Salatul Fajr because they've had a late night or a few days in a row where they've been extremely busy and their body is tired and they sleep through Fajr, this is natural human behavior. This is not something that makes you spiritually inferior. Okay? Yes, of course, as Muslims, we want to make our obligations on time, and we don't want to be lacking when it comes to our obligations. But that doesn't mean that we can't cut ourselves any slack. Okay? We react to a situation with anger. Okay? Now, we're human beings. Sometimes it happens. Okay? Sometimes we snap. Sometimes we're stressed. That doesn't mean Allah says, now look, this guy was at 10, he's now at 7. Or God forbid at 2 or 1 or 0. Sometimes we take it that hard on ourselves, right? That we go from 10 to 0. But we're fooling ourselves at 10 and we're fooling ourselves at 0. The honest truth is, Allah wants us as we are. He wants honest improvement. He wants honest accountability. He wants an honest pathway towards the truth. So these are the things that we need to do in order to bring our nafs and shaitan into a balance now, where we start to move into the mode of guidance. And of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us faculties for that. The first one we've already spoken about, which is the fitrah. The next important faculty that Allah has given us is the qalb, the heart. Now the heart occupies a very sacred place in the psychology of the human being, because it is the faculty with which we respond to divine reminding or divine messaging. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about reminding human beings. As you know, one of the names of the Holy Quran is that it is a reminder. Okay? And that is because we have the fitrah within ourselves that already knows the religion of Islam. If you remember from the ayah, فِطْرَةَ اللَّهِ الَّتِي فَطَرَ النَّاسَ عَلَيْهَا لَا تَبْدِيلَ لِخَلْقِ اللَّهِ ذَلِكَ الدِّينُ الْقَيِّمُ. The natural disposition that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created, or Allah's natural disposition that He's created man upon, there is no change in that disposition. That is the upright religion. It is already within. Okay, and when you hear this word, the fitrah of Allah, Allah doesn't have a fitrah. When He adds His name to something, okay, it is to honor that thing. So for example, we talk about the Kaaba being the Baytullah, the house of Allah. And in the Holy Quran we have it referred to as Bayti, my house. Of course, we are all aware Allah has no house. Allah doesn't live in a house. So when He says my house, it is a metaphorical usage. It is to tell us that this house is honored. Or for example, when He says وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي, and I blew into him, the human being, my spirit. Allah is not a body and spirit, so that He has a spirit and He blows into you a portion of His spirit. When He talks about the spirit of the human being, He's honoring that spirit. He's saying this spirit, like this house and like this fitrah, is something honored in my eyes. So tomorrow inshallah we will start going into the aspect of the reminding exhortation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Of course, Allah doesn't need to be reminded. We need to be reminded. And we'll also talk about the heart and the place of the heart, inshallah, in self-improvement. For the rest of this evening, we are looking at the last few nights before the day of Ashura. And as is the culture, we start to look at the family of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, reciting their individual battles, because the day of Karbala and the day of Ashura is a day where we mourn Imam al-Hussein alayhi afdalus salatu wassalam with the full concentration. Tonight, as you all know, is the night of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salam, the moon of Karbala. Tonight we turn to the river, but not to drink. Tonight we stand with the man who died thirsty so that others might spiritually live on. We stand with Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. He was the son of Ali, born of the lion's loins, trained in the shadow of Dhul Fiqar. He was called the Qamar of the Bani Hashim because of his tall stature, broad chest, and handsome countenance. But he was more than a warrior. He was the breath of loyalty, the arms of courage, the sweetness of the eyes of Zainab, and the shield of Hussein. Before Ashura Day, Al-Abbas had been in charge of ensuring the supply of water to the soldiers and children. He had led a detachment of men to break through the lines of the blockade. They were successful in bringing some water for the camp, and this is one of the reasons given for how Al-Abbas came to be known as As-Saqa, the water bearer. On the night of Ashura, when Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam suggested to his companions that they should depart from Karbala and leave him alone, he was the first to declare his loyalty and readiness to sacrifice with words which resounded with love, faith, and selflessness. On the day of Ashura, Al-Abbas did not fight at dawn. He did not seek glory. He waited. He watched as others placed their lives down in defense of the Imam. including his own brothers who he sent before himself. It is said that he left the Imam's side only once on that day to help a group of trapped companions rejoin the main forces. Al-Abbas was the last line of defense. If Abbas fell, the camp knew that only Hussein would remain. There are two narratives of Al-Abbas's martyrdom in the earlier sources. I will recite both of them for you tonight. In the first account it says, when the men of the family of the Prophet ﷺ had all been slain, Al-Abbas fought in front of Al-Hussein, protecting him. He followed Al-Hussein wherever he went. Al-Hussein's thirst became severe, so he rode to the river, seeking to reach the Euphrates with Abbas riding with him. A man shot an arrow at Al-Hussein, hitting his blessed throat. He pulled out the arrow and placed his hand below the wound. His palms filled with blood, and he threw the blood upwards and said, "O Allah, I complain to you of what is being done to the son of the daughter of your Prophet." Then he withdrew to his former position, his thirst becoming more intense. The enemy surrounded Al-Abbas, separating him from Al-Hussein. He fought against them alone until he was martyred. In the other account, Al-Abbas came to seek permission to fight the enemy, at which point Al-Hussein alayhi salam asked him to secure some water for the thirsty children. He tied a water skin to his side. He took the banner of Al-Hussein in his right hand and he rode. The enemies tried to stop him, but Abbas split their ranks. He reached the Euphrates and dismounted. He scooped water in his hand and then he poured it. He looked at it and said, "Ya nafs min ba'd al-Husayn huni." O nafs, after Hussein, you are worth nothing. وبعده لا كنتي أو تكوني. And after him, whether you exist or don't exist, it doesn't matter. هذا الحسين شارب المنون. This is Hussein who drinks death. وتشربين بارد المعين. And you would drink cold water. And he dropped it. He filled the skin and he mounted his horse. He turned his back, but they ambushed him. A man struck off his right arm. He cried, "By God, if you cut my right arm, I will never stop defending my religion." And the truthful and rightful Imam, the son of the Prophet, who was pure and trusted, he fought on until he began to tire from the many wounds he received and was ambushed a second time, and his second left arm was cut off. He comforted his soul, saying, "O my soul, do not fear the unbelievers. May you receive the glad tidings of the mercy of the All-Powerful. With the Prophet, the leader of the selective, they have severed in their wickedness my left hand, so consign them, O Lord, to the heat of the fire." But then Al-Abbas alayhi salam was hit with a blow with an iron mace and he died. It is narrated that when Al-Hussein saw him lying lifeless at the bank of the Euphrates, he wept and said these words which echo with pain. "O wretched people, with this act you have transgressed all bounds and opposed the guidance of the Prophet Muhammad. Did not the best of messengers advise you about us? Are we not from the progeny of the favored Prophet? Is not Az-Zahra my mother and not yours? Is not Ahmad the best of creation? May you be cursed and humiliated because of your crime. Soon you will feel the heat of the stoked fire. And in another account, Al-Hussein is reported to have said, now my back has broken and my options reduced. الآن انكسر ظهري وقلت حيلتي. O mourners of Abbas, he was not just the son of Ali, he was not just a warrior, he was Al-Abbas, the moon that gave light to Karbala, the arms that held the flag of truth, the soul that gave up water so that others may live. He was loyalty in flesh, and tonight we say, O Abbas, we were not there when your arms were severed, but we carry your flag in our hearts. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. We ask you, O Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to help all of the Muslimin throughout the globe, and especially in Gaza and in the Middle East. We ask you, O Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to alleviate the pain and suffering and difficulty, sickness of all of the people in our community and of the Muslims worldwide. We ask you, O Allah, to help us and make us successful in this world and the hereafter, to allow us to take the path of success and felicity and truth and guidance, and to avoid the system of misguidance and perdition. And we ask you, O Allah, to save us from the hellfire. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.
السلام عليك يا سيدي ومولاي يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدتي نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا أبا محمد الحسن المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. Take your hearts to Karbala, oh brothers and sisters. Assalamu ala al-Husayn wa ala Ali ibn al-Husayn wa ala awlad al-Husayn wa ala ashab al-Husayn. Ya mu'minin, when it comes to Abbas, his status is so lofty that the Imam would say that all the shaheed, all the shuhada, on the day of judgment, they would look up and see Abbas's status. The Imam would say that Abbas, instead of arms, Allah will give him wings like an angel, because he gave his arms for his master Abba Abdullah. Let me take you to Karbala. When the family of Abba Abdullah are in the desert of Karbala, Aliun al-Akbar has been killed, Qasim has been killed, killed. There are no companions left except for Abbas and Aba Abdullah. Abbas goes to his master. He says to him, Ya Sayyidi, Ya Mawlai, I am tired of these hypocrites. I can't take what they have done to my nephew Ali al-Akbar, what they've done to Al-Qasim. Give me permission to go and fight. Aba Abdullah turns to Abbas, tearful. He says, Oh Abbas, if you are gone, then who is there in my army? You are my backbone, O Abbas. Ya Aba Abdullah, how hard it was for you to see Abbas leave. Aba Abdullah says, Oh Abbas, I won't give you permission to go fight, but if you must, go and fetch water for the thirsty children who are crying out, Al-Atash, Al-Atash. Abbas gets on his horse. He launches an attack on the river Euphrates. The army are protecting it. They see the son of Amir al-Mu'mineen approach. They all disperse. As Abbas comes towards the river, he gets off his horse. He goes into the river, and then he says his famous words, Ya nafsu min ba'd al-Husayn huni wa ba'dahu ma kunti aw taquni hada al-Husayn warid al-manuni wa tashrabina barid al-ma'ini. The enemies are looking at Abbas. They're seeing what he does. They're thinking if Abbas drinks a drop of water, then he will be rejuvenated. Oh Abbas, on that moment you are the master of the Euphrates. You put the water in your hands as if to say, I own this river on this day. But watch me, the servant of Aba Abdullah. Wallah, I will never drink a drop of water while my master Aba Abdullah is thirsty. He throws the water back into the river. Abbas fills the water container. He goes on his horse, going back to Aba Abdullah. Some accounts mention that he would be calling out, Anna ibn Amir al-Mu'mineen, Anna ibn Ali al-Murtada. Aba Abdullah would hear these calls to know that Abbas was coming back. All of a sudden, this call stopped. Ya Aba Abdullah, what did you hear instead? Aba Abdullah hears instead, Wallahi in qata'atuhu al-yamini. They have severed my right hand. Wallahi in qata'atuhu al-yamini inni uhami abadan an dini. By God, I will never stop protecting this religion. Abbas is still going back towards the camp until another man comes. He severs Abbas's left arm. He calls out, Ya nafsu la takshay min al-kufari. O soul, do not worry by the actions of the disbelievers. Notice this, Ya Mu'mineen. Abbas keeps on going back to the camp. He doesn't stop for a moment because Abbas has an objective: to deliver water back to the camp of Aba Abdullah. Abbas wanted, Sukaina's waiting for the water. As Abbas is going back to the camp, فسهم أصاب الصدر, an arrow pierces his chest. وسهم أصاب العين, an arrow pierces his eye. وسهم أصاب الغرب, an arrow pierces the water container. The Makdal says, one of the saddest lines on Ashura, فوقف العباس متحيرا. Abbas stood perplexed. This is Abbas, the son of Ali. Why does Abbas stand perplexed in the middle of the battlefield? He has no arms to fight with. He has no eye to see with. But most importantly, he has no water to take back to the thirsty children. Ya Abbas. All of a sudden, a man comes from behind. He takes an iron rod. He hits Abbas on his blessed head. Wa Sayyida wa Abbasa. Abbas falls to the ground. He calls out for the first time, Akhi adrik akhak. Oh brother, come to your brother. Aba Abdullah. He comes like a roaring lion. He goes to them and says, where do you flee when you have killed my brother? Aba Abdullah. He goes towards Abbas. As he lay next to Abbas, he puts Abbas's head into his lap. He calls out, Al-ana biqasra dahri wa قلت حيلتي الآن شموي عدوي. He says the enemies rejoice after you, Abbas. He says my back is now broken, Ya Abbas. One narration says Abbas removes his head from the lap of Aba Abdullah. Why is it, oh Abbas, you remove your head from the lap of Aba Abdullah? Is it because you know at this moment you have the comfort of being in Aba Abdullah's lap? Ya Abbas, in an hour's time, who will have Aba Abdullah's lap? Head in their lap. Allahu Akbar. Aba Abdullah, he goes towards the camp. Sukaina calls out, Waina Ammi al-Abbas. Where is my uncle Abbas? Allahu Akbar. Aba Abdullah, not being able to respond, instead he goes to the tent of Abbas to remove the pillar, as if to say Abbas will not be coming back. Zainab comes out. She calls out, Wadayatana ba'dak ya Abul Fadl. She says, what a loss it is after you, Ya Abul Fadl. What does Imam al-Hussein say back? Imam al-Hussein says, Wadayatana ba'dak ya Abul Fadl. He goes and agrees, what a loss it is after you. Ya Abul Fadl, you are always there to quench the thirst of Aba Abdullah. Let me take you to the plains of Karbala. Aba Abdullah's lying in the killing pit. He calls out, Bihaqqi Jaddi Anadshan. By my grandfather, I am thirsty. Oh Abbas, if only you were there to witness how they repaid his request for thirst. Ala la'natullahi ala qawm ad-dhalimin. Ya Hussein. 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 हो गया मरना सितम अब्बास का करते हैं मातम हरम अब्बास का. हो गया मरना सितम अब्बास का करते मातम हरम अब्बास का. हो गया मरना सितम अब्बास का करते हो गया मरना सितम अब्बास का. हाय लबे नहर हुआ क्या गज़ब. तीर लगा मश्क सकीना पे जब. तीर लगा मश्क सकीना पे जब. आ गया घूंटों पे दम अब्बास का. हो गया मरना सितम अब्बास का. करते हैं मातम हरम अब्बास का. हो गया मरना सितम अब्बास का. कहते गए रो रो के ये अहले गरम.
جاہو حشم صبر رضا اور کرم کس طرح بھولیں گے غم عباس کا ہو
گیا مردان ستم عباس کا
کرتے ہیں
ماتم حرم عباس کا ہو گیا مردان ستم عباس کا
لے کے شہنشاہ وفا سے غیاث لے کے شہنشاہ وفا سے غیاث چومنے قدموں کو بڑھی خود فرات چومنے قدموں کو بڑھی خود فرات دیکھ کے جاؤ حشم عباس کا
ہو گیا مردان ستم عباس کا
کرتے ہیں
ماتم حرم عباس کا ہو گیا مردان ستم عباس
کا کرتے ہیں ماتم غرم
عباس کا ہو گیا مردان ستم عباس کا
شاہ کے غم خار پہ ہر ایک پل شہ کے عزادار پہ ہر ایک پل رہتا ہے اب بھی کرم عباس کا
ہو گیا مردان ستم عباس کا کرتے ہیں ماتم حرم عباس کا ہو گیا مردان ستم عباس کا
پھر میرے مولا سے نہ سنبھلا غلم پانی بغا ہو گیا ٹھنڈا علم مشک میں شاید تھا دم عباس کا
ہو گیا مردان ستم عباس کا کرتے ہیں ماتم حرم عباس کا ہو گیا مردان ستم عباس کا
اب بھی ہے بے شیر کی مقتل کی یاد اب بھی ہے باقی شہ کربل کی یاد اب بھی ہے اونچا علم عباس کا ہو گئے
مردان ستم عباس کا کرتے ہیں ماتم حرم عباس کا ہو گیا مردان ستم عباس کا
نبض سکینہ تو وہیں رک گئی نبض سکینہ تو وہیں رک گئی شاہ مدینہ کی کمر جھک گئی جب ہوا بازو قلم عباس کا
ہو گیا مردان ستم عباس کا
کرتے ہیں
ماتم حرم عباس کا ہو گیا مردان ستم عباس کا
اب کہاں بجھ پائے گی دکھیا کی پیاس ٹوٹ گئی بالی سکینہ کی آس ٹوٹ گئی بالی سکینہ کی آس ہو گیا بازو قلم عباس کا
ہو گیا مردان ستم عباس کا کرتے ہیں ماتم حرم عباس کا ہو گیا مردان ستم عباس کا
اشک لہو رو دیا چرخے کو غن رو دیے بے ساخت شاہ زمن دیکھ کے چھلنی علم عباس کا
ہو گیا مردان ستم عباس کا کرتے ہیں ماتم حرم عباس کا ہو گیا مردان ستم عباس کا
لے کے شہنشاہ وفا سے غیاث لے کے شہنشاہ وفا سے غیاث چومنے قدموں کو بڑھی خود فرات دیکھ کے جاؤ حشم عباس کا
ہو گیا مردان ستم عباس کا کرتے ہیں ماتم حرم عباس کا ہو گیا مردان ستم عباس کا کرتے ہیں ماتم حرم عباس کا ہو گیا مردان ستم عباس کا
یا حسین 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 خالق تیرا ممنون ہے خالق تیرا ممنون ہے اے مصطفیٰ فاطمہ کے نور ہے، یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین. جب ردا سر سے چھنی میں صدا دیتی رہی، تو نہ آیا غازی. جب ردا سر سے چھنی میں صدا دیتی رہی، تو نہ آیا غازی. جب ردا سر سے چھنی میں صدا دیتی رہی، تو نہ آیا غازی. جب ردا سر سے چھنی میں صدا دیتی رہی، تو نہ آیا غازی. آل عمران کہاں اور زندان کہاں، یہ بہن قید ہوئی، تو نہ آیا غازی. جب ردا سر سے چھنی میں صدا دیتی رہی، تو نہ آیا غازی. جب ردا سر سے چھنی میں صدا دیتی رہی، تو نہ آیا غازی. ہم کو پانی نہ ملے تیری خوشبو تو رہے، تیرے بازو نہ کٹے چاہے مشکی زاچی دے، یہ مگر ہو نہ سکا تیرے بازو ہے جدا. مجھ پہ ہے تشنا لبی، تو نہ آیا غازی. جب ردا سر سے چھنی میں صدا دیتی رہی، تو نہ آیا غازی. جب ردا سر سے چھنی میں صدا دیتی رہی، تو نہ آیا غازی. دھوپ میں تو تھا شجر، تجھ سے آباد تھا گر، ہے برہنا میرا سر، کیا نہیں تجھ کو خبر. اے علمدار وفا اس بہن کو باخدا، تجھ سے دھارستی بھری، تو نہ آیا غازی. جب ردا سر سے چھنی میں صدا دیتی رہی، تو نہ آیا غازی. یا حسین